Hello, so you wanted a bonus, so here's your bonus. First, let me tell you a little bit about where I got the idea for this story. This is one that's not finished yet. I'm still working on it. It's very first draftish. It still has to be polished up a bit, but we'll do that when I get to the two most important words of any story, the end. Haven't gotten there yet. But anyway, this story was inspired by a town in Pennsylvania about an hour north of where I live called Centralia. Now, Centralia started as a coal miner town. Everybody who lived there worked in the coal mines. It was a very poor region, um, and as typical for most coal mining towns. But around the 1970s, I believe it was 74. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I think it was around 74. Um, Somebody took a load of trash to the local dump, set fire to it, and the fire somehow got underground. It caught fire on the coal, and the town has been burning ever since. They can't put out the fire. They tried, and it didn't work. Things were getting dangerous in Centralia to the point where sinkholes were opening all over town. People were falling in and getting injured. So finally, they just decided it was too dangerous a region to live in. They took the zip code off the map. They told everybody had to leave. I think there's only one or two people still living there. And they bulldozed every single building in the town. So you have roads going nowhere. You have foundations of houses with no house attached to them. All these kind of things. The town is kind of spooky looking, and it has inspired inspired a video game, but that was horror based, which then went into a movie. But it was, as I said, it was horror based, and I kept thinking about the story of the town and going, I think they got it wrong. I mean, okay, some people come up with different ideas for different things, but there was a story that was just screaming at me about this kind of situation. So no one had written it yet, so I decided to write it. And well, this is the beginning of the story that I'm writing about based on Centralia. It's an urban fantasy. I hope you enjoy it. And as I said, I'm just going to read you the beginning of it, give you a little taste of it. This is also a story I'm a little worried that I may be crossing some lines with. So we'll see. It all depends on how I wrote it. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into the working title is Bookwrym. It will probably not keep that title. I'm opening my laptop for it. So it may go through several changes. We'll see. But anyway, as I said, working title Bookwrym. Here's how it starts. I just drop everything into the middle of it. You've killed him, Dale screeched in utter panic. The 10-year-old boy peered down the smoking hole in the middle of the woods. No, I didn't, Glenn denied. He's just faking it. Skippy crawled on his belly to the crater's edge. I can see him. See, he's perfectly fine, Glenn assured. He ain't moving, were Skippy's next words. He sure looks dead to me. Dale smacked Glenn's arm. Why'd you have to push him? I didn't push him. He slipped, Glenn retorted. Skippy looked up with a twisted expression. What are you talking about? We both saw you shove him. You're dead meat, dude. You are so in trouble, Dale said. Your dad's gonna tan your hide. If I'm in trouble, you're in trouble, posed Glenn. Hey, what did we do? Dale shot back. I had nothing to do with any of this, Skippy said. It was all you, Glenn. Why didn't you just give him back his phone like he asked? Dale said. This is all your fault. I told you he slipped, Glenn insisted, as if repeating it would somehow make it true. My parents are going to kill me, wailed Skippy. I'll be grounded for life. Glenn swung aboard his bike and began to pedal madly away. Where do you think you're going? Dale glowered. I'm going back home, he shot back over his shoulder. You both are idiots. I saw him slip. He paused and half turned his bike around. And if you tell anybody anything, I'll kill you both. He slipped. That's all anyone needs to know. He slipped. He spun about and pedaled away. The other two looked at each other doubtfully. Man, we are so screwed, Dale said. They both swung aboard their bikes and followed Glenn away from the hole in the ground. A fourth blue bike was lying next to the crater. Smoke lazily curled upwards from the mouth of the fissure. The silence of the forest swallowed up the scene. Nathan came back to the present through waves of pain. His scalp burned and he could feel blood dripping onto his face. He opened his eyes and tried to peer about. It was dark and there was smoke everywhere. He could barely breathe, the smoke was so thick. He coughed, but that only made the blood drip into his eyes faster. He dragged a sleeve across his forehead and hissed in pain as his arm touched a jagged wound. He blinked again. He thought he could see something shiny, glinting in the darkness just out of reach. He squinted at it and his vision cleared slightly. They were the remains of his phone, shattered into pieces. He remembered what happened. Those three boys from school, Skippy, Dale, and what was the big guy's name? Oh, that's right, Glenn. He hadn't liked Glenn the minute he met him. He had spent all day teasing him, calling him Patches, because of the henna stain which was starting to fade from the white parts of his face. The henna didn't exactly match his chocolate-colored skin anyway, and needed to be redone on a regular basis. And this was all because his mom didn't want him to be picked on for looking different. Nice try, Mom. Kids picked on him anyway for a million reasons. Why was he a black kid with a white mom? Why didn't he like sports? Why did he read so much? Why did he pretend to be smart? His dark skin with white patches was only one more thing to attract the bullies. The best comment was, "Are you trying to turn white?" He remembered. The big guy, Glenn, had snatched his phone out of his hands at the end of the school day and refused to give it back. He told him he would return it if Nathan went with him, and then Glenn jumped on his bike and rode away. Nathan had no choice but to follow him. The two other boys, Dale and Skippy, followed along to keep him from turning around. Glenn took him out of Ashland to a road through the woods. The road grew rougher and less well tended. There were cracks and potholes everywhere, and eventually it transformed into an asphalt spider webbed with fractures, covered in brightly colored yet sun-faded graffiti. Then Glenn turned off onto a dirt track past empty buildings, boarded-up houses, and weed-infested yards. This eventually led to a single dirt track through which took the four through the woods to a hole in the ground. The hole was spooky-looking. It yawned wide and dark before him, like the jaws of some creature from your worst nightmare, and smoke was billowing out the entrance. "Where are we?" Nathan asked. Glenn gave a mean sort of laugh. "This is where the monster lives," he told him. Nathan just scoffed. "There's no such thing as monsters." "There is here," Glenn told him. "It comes out late at night. It eats anyone who it finds wandering these parts. That's why all the people left." Nathan smirked, but Dale had caught the idea and jumped in. "He's right. You're safe as long as the sun is up. When the sun goes down, it comes out and shreds anyone it finds, always making sure to eat their heart first while it's still beating." Nathan snickered and shook his head. "Yeah, right." But the smaller boy, Skippy, looked genuinely scared. "Guys, can we go home? I'm not supposed to be here. You know this is where all the bad things happen. My mom will kill me if she knows I came here." Dale just rolled his eyes. "Well then, don't tell her. You won't get in trouble." Dale and Glenn grinned like Cheshire cats at Nathan. Skippy sat on his bike, looking everywhere and acting scared. "Okay, nice try," Nathan said. "But I'm not afraid of your local ghost stories. I did what you asked. Now give me back my phone." Glenn shrugged. "All right, come and get it." He taunted and held the phone out, dangling it over the gaping hole. Nathan frowned and got off his bike. He walked up to Glenn and glared at him. "Give me back my phone now," Nathan demanded. "Sure, take it, if you can," Glenn teased, and angled his arm further over the fissure. Nathan made a grab for it just as Glenn dropped the phone into the blackness of the hole. At the same time, Nathan felt the other boy's hand in the middle of his back. Glenn gave him a huge shove. Nathan tried to spin about and grab Glenn's arm, but the other boy had already hopped back and out of reach. Nathan's feet scrambled, but there was nothing underneath them. He felt himself falling into the smoky darkness. The other two boys shouted. Glenn laughed and cried out, "So long, Patches, you loser!" And then some rock-hard corner struck his scalp above his eyes. He heard a crack in his head, and his world had gone dark and silent. Now he was awake, covered in blood and in pain. Even in his worst nightmares, he had never dreamed of a pain this intense. And then a thunderous voice, like a cascade of boulders in the mountains, boomed right over his head. "Lay still," the voice said in the deepest tone he had ever heard. "You are badly injured. Your scalp needs tending. I will do what I can." What happened next made him question if he was really awake. He had the oddest sensation of a great hot tongue as long as a giraffe's, tracing its wet arc across his scalp. In its wake followed a searing sensation. He felt he was being branded, and he smelt blood and skin and smoke and sizzle. He hissed and tried to lay still. No, he was still very much awake. "There," tumbled the deep voice in satisfaction. "I have cauterized your wound. You will bleed no more." Nathan felt a gust of wind, and a small flame and a lantern held by knobby fingers lit up the darkness. He squinted at the sudden brightness and turned away. He wondered why this strange person had a lantern instead of a flashlight. Had he fallen backwards through time? "There is a mirror behind you and a basin with a cloth to clean your face, should you wish. I would advise you to do so. You're quite a sight. You wouldn't want to upset your family," his mysterious benefactor directed. Gingerly, Nathan rolled to his feet and stood up. There was a mirror propped against the stone wall with a gilt frame. Beneath it was a large basin of water and a silk cloth. He wet the cloth, wondering why it was fine-spun silk instead of the coarse white medical bandages like the school nurse had for skinned knees and bloody noses. Peering into the mirror, he began to clean his face. The voice was right. There was a lot of blood. Some had run down and stained his shirt. His face was streaked everywhere. He was thankful he wasn't the fainting type. He looked like a Halloween costume from a horror movie. There was so much on his face and the back of his head. Every time he thought he was finished, he found more. The adults always said head wounds bled like crazy. Nathan supposed they were right. The gash went from the middle of his forehead into his hairline for about 10 inches. It looked deep and serious, but at least it was no longer bleeding. "You may have a slight concussion," the voice told him. "You are exceedingly lucky you did not crack your skull wide open," Nathan grunted. "They pushed me," he said. "Yes, I heard everything," the voice replied. "I guess I should be grateful that I'm not dead," Nathan went on. "How long was I out?" The voice behind him gurgled in amusement. "Not long." He peered closer into the mirror, inspecting the injury now that it was clean. "I'm going to have a grapefruit on my noggin by tomorrow," he said with a small laugh. The voice behind him seemed puzzled. "No, you won't," it replied. "Accidents do not cause fruit to grow on humans." It was Nathan's turn to be confused. "I meant it's going to swell up," he explained. "Ah," the voice replied. "I see." He got the distinct impression the owner of the voice was shrugging. "Perhaps." Nathan tried to shake his head, but it hurt too much. "My mom is going to pitch a fit." A rumbling chuckle echoed from behind him. "That is a mother's prerogative," the voice said. "I'd be more worried if she didn't show concern." Nathan peered closer into the mirror. He noticed that all the henna had pretty much worn off around the white blotches on his face, and his hands were the same way. He inspected the splotches that went around his chin and neck. It was while he was doing this that he noticed it. He shifted his gaze to focus not on the reflection, but at the dark spot over his shoulder at what stood just behind him. There was one great eye, its pupil slit like a cat's, staring over his shoulder. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He quietly took a step to the side so that his own reflection didn't block his vision so much. The eye was so big it filled most of the mirror. Nathan uttered a squawk of surprise and spun about to face it. His eyes flew wide open, and he stumbled onto the floor, pulling the basin over with a bang and a splash. He never even felt the water soak the front of his shirt and jeans. He remembered to breathe. Panting in surprise, he crab-walked backwards until a rock wall stopped his progress. "You're he stammered in horror. "A dragon." And I'm going to stop.